Good afternoon. It's Saturday, August 1st here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California. And on your screen is a live view of the interior of the Dragon spacecraft as we await its departure from the International Space Station. Now, we expect Dragon to push away from the space station with NASA astronauts Bob Behnken, who's actually in the frame right now, and Doug Hurley on board just after 4:35 p.m. Pacific time to make their way back home to planet Earth. My name is Shiva Bharadwaj, and I'm a space operations engineer here at SpaceX, and I'm really excited to be bringing you live coverage today of Crew Dragon as it completes its very first trip to space with people on board as part of our second demonstration mission for NASA. And joining me today is NASA Public Affairs Officer Leah Cheshire.
Thanks for having me, Shiva. It really is great to be back here for this historic milestone moment in NASA's Commercial Crew program. Once Dragon departs station, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley's flight home is expected to last roughly 19 hours. That'll include 4 departure burns that move Dragon away from station, a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with its landing location, and one final deorbit burn. Their trip home will also include an 8-hour sleep period later tonight, where both crew members will be able to get some rest before their arrival back on Earth tomorrow after a little more than 2 months in space. Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Pensacola, Florida in the Gulf of Mexico tomorrow at 11:48 a.m. Pacific time, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels.
Now, the mission began about 2 months ago on May 30th from historic Launch Pad 39A at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And after a successful separation from the Falcon 9, Bob and Doug enjoyed a 19-hour flight on board Dragon before they came to the International Space Station. Now, since arriving, Bob and Doug have been doing some real work aboard the station. In fact, Bob and Station Commander Chris Cassidy completed several spacewalks, and they've also been taking some really spectacular photos of planet Earth and the Dragon spacecraft as it's been in attached operations. We'll have a chance to share some of those later on in the broadcast.
And I can't believe it, but it's already been 63 days since they arrived in space, so they are just entering the final phase of their mission in just a few hours from now and have been preparing for over the last 2 weeks for their return flight. Today on board the space station is the Expedition 63 crew, led by NASA's Chris Cassidy and joined by Russian cosmonauts Anatoly Ivanishin and Ivan Wagner, and of course, Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley.
Now, while all the crew have been busy aboard, the ground teams have also been performing a number of checkouts in preparation for departure today. These checkouts have been going on over the last several days, and in fact, last week. They've included inspections of the heat shield, checkouts of the suits, some checkouts of the comm systems, as well as a number of activation procedures on the life support system on the vehicle, and cargo loading, which has been really cool. Actually, why don't we check in with Gary at Johnson Space Center? He can let us know how the station crew have been preparing and what we can expect from here. Gary?
Thank you, Shiva and Leah, and welcome inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Since arriving at the space station, Bob and Doug jumped right in as fully fledged members of Expedition 63. Over the last 2 months, they've helped execute more than 24 scientific investigations from every major category of research aboard the station, including studies in biology and biotechnology, earth and space sciences, human research, physical sciences, and technology demonstration. They've also had plenty of non-science-related work on their timelines, performing maintenance on life support and vehicle hardware in multiple modules and transferring cargo in and out of the attached HTV-9 cargo spacecraft. Bob Behnken also executed 4 spacewalks with Station Commander Chris Cassidy, wrapping up one of the final phases of upgrading the station's large external batteries, with Doug assisting in all suit and robotic operations. Since completing the spacewalks, Bob and Doug have spent the last 2 weeks preparing to come home. They received some additional on-orbit training to refresh them on the departure, re-entry, and splashdown procedures, and have been busy packing cargo for their return. In fact, that's what they're doing right now. There will be approximately 150 kilograms or 330 pounds of cargo returning on Dragon. The majority of that is more than 200 pounds of science, largely made up of samples packed away into powered cold freezers. These samples are from a range of biological research experiments on the station dedicated to improving our understanding of how the human body adapts to microgravity, or looking at ways to use space to improve life back here on Earth. Now, let's go through some of the major upcoming milestones for today's departure coming up soon at just around 2:35 p.m. Pacific. We're currently awaiting Bob and Doug to ingress or board the station, or board the Dragon for their return flight home. They're doing a little bit of closeout duties now, but that'll be one of the first items on their agenda today. So less than 30 minutes from now, they'll be closing Dragon's hatch around 2:45 p.m. Pacific time. Once inside the vehicle, Bob and Doug will don their SpaceX spacesuits, which will be worn during all dynamic phases of the flight. All those same leak checks on the spacecraft would occur before the crew makes their way into the seats and straps in for undocking. Once the Dragon's hatch is closed, Chris Cassidy will affix a docking target to the outside of the A-Pass hatch and then close it about 10 minutes later, 2:55 p.m. Pacific, creating a space between the Dragon and station known as the vestibule. He then has one more hatch to close. That's the Node 2 forward hatch. Now, after all of those hatches are closed, about 15 minutes later, a ground command will be sent to open the valves on the Dragon side and begin depressurization. That's at 3:10 p.m. Pacific, essentially venting air inside and bringing that space down close to vacuum. They have to pause for 5 psi for a few minutes, allowing the temperature inside that vestibule to stabilize, perform a good leak check, and then continue depressurization. 4:20 p.m. Central Time, they'll conduct a go, no-go poll. That'll be the NASA teams here in Mission Control Houston and SpaceX teams in Hawthorne. If all is go, the undocking sequence begins. The undocking command will be sent, followed by a few minutes for the umbilical that connects the power and data between the two spacecraft to detach. 12 hooks will retract, and then 2 firings of Dragon's thrusters will initiate, and the undocking will be complete. That separation scheduled for 4:34 p.m. Pacific time. Now, the departure burn, there's 4 departure burns. Immediately after those 2 burns, they'll actually have that physical separation, and the departure burns will take them around the zenith side of the International Space Station. Those departure burns taking place, there's 4 of them, and will be taking place over the first few hours of their flight, essentially getting that Dragon further away from the International Space Station. Now, overnight, the crew will be able to get a sleep period in. In fact, this orbital trajectory gives them plenty of time to allow for the crew sleep, to get them in a good circadian rhythm, and allow them to perform all of their tasks prior to splashdown, including while they are asleep. They're going to also be performing a phase burn. Right now, they're in the orbital plane of the International Space Station, but that phase burn will align them with their primary landing site. Right now, we're looking go for Pensacola, just off the coast of Pensacola, Florida. They'll perform a series of checks right upon waking up when that phase burn occurs while they are asleep. Those checks, they'll put on their suits and get ready for the deorbit sequence. The deorbit sequence is, there's a few steps there. First, there's going to be the preparation for the claw separation. There's the Dragon's trunk. They're going to perform a heavy yaw of the Dragon vehicle and release the Dragon trunk off to the side so it doesn't intersect with the vehicle during the deorbit sequence. Align Dragon back up with the orbital plane and fire the forward bulkhead Dracos. This will be one of the longest burns, and that is the deorbit burn, almost more than actually 11 minutes long. And that will slow them down enough. They'll position Dragon for re-entry into Earth's atmosphere, and then the re-entry sequence will begin. Of course, before they do that, they do have to close the nose cone. So after they close the nose cone, they'll go through the atmosphere, shoot the drogue parachutes, main parachutes, and then splashdown. That's scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, Sunday afternoon, around 1:48 p.m. Central Time, 11:48 a.m. Pacific Time. Then the recovery operations begin. After that, Bob and Doug will be back on planet Earth. Now, Station Commander Chris Cassidy will be watching the undocking and departure burn from the cupola, but the prime monitoring role falls to Bob and Doug. Flight controllers in Mission Control Houston will be backing them up. Now, as you've heard several times, Dragon's flight is intended to be autonomous, but the crew on board has the ability to take control and maneuver Dragon during the departure if necessary. On the station side, we're looking good. Solar arrays are locked in place. We have good communication links, and all station systems are looking healthy. Attitude will remain on U.S. control until the time of undocking, when we'll switch to control moment gyros only. We're tracking no issues for an on-time departure here in Mission Control Houston. Now back to Shiva and Leah in Hawthorne.